Statistics South Africa says child labour accounts for less than 5% in South Africa. It says this data is contained in its quarterly labour force survey. Experts have gathered at the Chief Inkosi Albert Luthuli International Conference Centre in Durban, where the 5th Global Conference on the Elimination of Child Labour is taking place. Liabo Setho is attending the conference and she joins us for more. Thanks very much, Liabo, for joining us. Must be quite an illuminating subject. Tell us more.
It indeed is, Nompu. Good afternoon to yourself and our viewers at home. We are here at the Durban ICC Centre, where you of course said in your intro that we are gathered here to hear all about child labour, and the most important thing is how do we eliminate it. It is understood that the numbers have jumped, and I expect it to jump even further. Now the numbers stand at 160 million according to the ILO, and actually projected to grow to 170 million in the next coming in a year or so. And this is quite concerning when you think about the role that children play, and that the children should be playing and not working. However, I've been wondering about, statistics and data collection, about how did we get to this 160 million? Obviously, statistical officers from various countries are the ones that would now be responsible for data collection. But what do they go through as they take this data? What methodology do they use? How reliable is it? These are all the questions that we've been asking. And I did earlier on get hold of a statistician in Johannesburg, in Stats South Africa, Malerato Masiane, to find out from her about what this questionnaire that they say Statistics South Africa uses in its quarterly labour force survey to determine the number of child labourers that are in South Africa, for instance, which of course she says account for less than 5%. It may sound like a small number, but it's still significant considering that children should not be working. Adults are the one that should be working. I spoke to Malerato Masiane earlier on, and this is what she told me about the statistics and how they gather them at Stats SA. Take a listen.
I would ask if they were involved in any economic activities, whether they were involved in doing any house chores, because some of the activities don't count as child labor. So we have a series of questions. I'm just going to give you an idea of what kind of questions we ask. We also try to establish if they missed any school because of having to be involved in doing some economic activities. And we also ask whether they work under certain conditions, whether they are exposed to dust, they have to climb ladders and all to do whatever activities that they get engaged in, how many hours they do get involved in doing economic activities, and whether they do any chores at home, whether they do any activities at school, what kind of activities they do, and whether they're exposed to dust and other hazardous conditions.
Dompu, with that domestic and local view of Statistics South Africa and how we collect this data, I thought it would be prudent to find out from the International Labour Organization's representative about how they gather this data from other countries and the challenges and opportunities that are there. Perhaps there is opportunity for innovation so that we find much more reliable data faster using more technology and IT tools. I've invited to come and share this information with us Ms. Michaela de Cox. She is with the ILO in the statistics department, heading one of the departments there. Michaela, thank you so much for joining us on Point. I've been telling you about how South Africa collates this data. You are an expert in how this data should be collected reliably. Take me through what are the most important parts that you look out for when countries send you data on child labor.
Thank you. This is an excellent question, and I like the fact that you put reliable at the heart of your question, because this is extremely important. Let's go one step back. The reason why countries collect data is to have reliable, accurate information about the phenomena, to understand who is at risk, in which part of the country. Is it some target group, some specific groups, or is it all over the country? Who are these children? Are they young? Are they older? What are the trends? Why do countries need that information? It's obvious. It's just to design evidence-based policy to make sure that the policies target the people who need them. So the fact that it comes from a decision from the countries to collect the data is key, and that they need to trust the data that they collect. So that's the first part of my answer. Now let's come back to the general process.
Yeah.
In order to get this data, it's always collected by the National Statistical Office. Exactly what you said about South Africa, this is all over the world and all over Africa. And it's important to know that there is, as you know here, there is an international legal definition of child labor, and there is an international statistical definition. This statistical definition is how do we translate a legal into something that can be measured.
Yeah.
And this statistical definition was discussed twice in the recent years by all member states and adopted by all member states. So now there is one unique statistical definition. Except that, because things are not that simple, each country, of course, is free to let's say, precise in their definition what should be counted.
Okay.
This is per the legal definition of child labor, as per ILO, in particular what is hazardous work. And as you know, hazardous work is enlarged.
Yes.
So the first thing that a country does when they want to measure is to adapt the statistical definition and the survey tools to reflect the national situation. So all data are always collected with the national definition of child labor.
Tell me, now that we are recovering as the world, trying to recover at least, that is, from the impact of COVID-19, how has this collection method been impacted, seeing that, other statistics officers actually need to go out physically to take some census information, while others are obviously much more advanced and can do that from the comfort of their office? How has the pandemic impacted data collection?
Yeah. The first impact was to stop. Unfortunately, in many countries, we see now that we have gaps.
Right.
For example, in countries which used to collect data every quarter, we have gaps. No data for Q2 2019 or 2020, so we will have holes in our data series. The second thing is that in some countries, they had to move from face-to-face to a telephone or survey, which in the case of child labor can be a bit tricky, let's say. I would like to say that we have two types, we recommend two types of child labor survey. One is what we call a standalone. So regularly countries decide to do a survey which is uniquely dedicated to child labor, not to labor force, only the
just
5 to 7.
Understood.
And this is quite good because in those surveys the country will go beyond the questions which are used for prevalence. They will ask about working conditions, they will ask...
And it will just focus on child labor.
Absolutely. But this is costly, of course. As you know, in order to get reliable figure, the number of households to be surveyed is quite high. I was looking in my statistics, and in Africa it's between 5,000, 25,000 households, which is big.
Yeah.
So it's costly, but it's really worth, because you get lots of information to understand the risk factors.
Yeah.
We ask about the parents' situation. Is it a single-headed
household,
absolutely,
or with both parents?
Exactly. What happened in the last 6 months?
Yeah.
What happened before the child was working? Was he at school and then they had to stop because of some shocks, economic shocks? So that's what we call a standalone. But given the cost, we also recommend countries to attach a module on child labor to their regular labor force survey.
Yes.
This is extremely efficient.
This is what the South African Census SA office is currently doing. Yeah.
This is fantastic because you can do it regularly and then see the trends and seasonality of child labor. So that's a very good way to collect regular data.
Fantastic information, Michaela. Thank you so much for your views. That's Michaela de Kock. She is the head of research and evaluation at the ILO. She's responsible for statistics and data collection, and she tells us about the importance of getting reliable data, Nompu, as this gives us the true picture. She does mention that in the issue of currently that there are some gaps because of what the pandemic has done, and there will, no doubt, we'll be looking at how to close that gap so that we get the actual information. As of now, 160 million children in child labor, projected to go up to 170 million. This has to be dealt with. Back to you in studio.
Thanks very much, my colleague there, Liabo Setho.